Hi, welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. In this podcast, we dive into compassionate leadership in today's fast-paced business environment. With our experience and insights, will help you lead with heart while securing your career. Join us for engaging conversations and practical advice to elevate your leadership skills and make a real difference. I'm your host, Roberto Torres, a seasoned startup engineering leader, alongside Chris Ollerkin, a Fortune 100 IT leader. Today, we're going to discuss what to do when a peer, a boss, or someone from your team does a tantrum to you. Hey man, how are you?
Hey Roberto, I'm doing good, and we're officially into fall, so the days are getting shorter.
I didn't know about that, but thank you for the insight.
Yep,
Great.
absolutely.
So even though we treat with adults, sometimes when we speak with, when we talk with another person, which maybe they are mad or maybe really mad, they have done sometimes tantrums. Have you faced this?
I have faced it from many directions, many directions. I've had bosses that done it. I've had peers. I've probably done it myself a fair number of times because sometimes you get very passionate about something and you don't realize you're getting into tantrum. But I think one of the key things I've recognized is don't dismiss out of hand how the other person is feeling. The tantrum that they're expressing from your perspective, right, seems perhaps significant or out of scale to relative to the problem. They're having this huge tantrum. It seems like a small problem to you. But from their perspective, that's an opinion, it's a feeling. It's never per se wrong. Maybe how they're expressing it could be done better, but I always first try to understand the tantrum to say why is this person having what appears to be a tantrum over something that from my perspective seems smaller. So do your best to try and first listen and hear what are they really, tantrum or ranting, whatever you want to classify as a tantrum, ranting about, to understand there might be some legitimacy to it first. So first try and hear it. And of course, don't rant back. You never want to start escalating the yelling back, regardless of your relationship with them, because then that only escalates the noise, the yelling, and very little communication takes place when you're screaming at each other.
Yes. And one thing that at first, when I began being a leader and then a humane leader, was to understand why this adult is behaving like a child. Because you might expect this from a child, but why this adult? And it is, as you mentioned, we don't know what has happened with this person before. They might, I don't know, this person might have arrived late at the office. They might have a big personal problem behind, or something like that. But in the end, if we act maybe calmly, if we act as active listening, these people might chill out, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you always do have to be a little bit worried with tantrums. While we haven't had many big stories in the news about office violence escalating into actual physical altercations lately, it hasn't been in the headlines. It can happen, right? It could be as simple as somebody then starts ranting and having a tantrum and actually physically pushes somebody and they fall and hurt themselves, or more violently actually strike out. So you do want to try and do what you can to diffuse it, because if you don't start to diffuse, the tantrum usually continues to escalate up, which then increases the odds of it escalating into something worse. So I do try to listen and hear what the person is saying, that active listening, and just never kind of discount their feelings. I would never use the phrase, "You shouldn't feel like that, Roberto." That's that's improper. You don't want to say that what they're feeling is wrong, because what they're feeling is what they're feeling. What you want to work through with them is to understand, why are you feeling that? And is there something we can do to change it? Is there something that we can do to make the problem less? So it really kind of, until you understand what's triggering the person, you can't start to diffuse it till you understand what it is. And again, like I'm going to use myself. I'm a big, loud guy, and sometimes when I get very passionate about things, my voice gets louder and louder, and it may, to some people who would interpret that as perhaps a tantrum, but instead it's because I'm really passionate about, we need to fix this, and this is the wrong way to do it. And okay, Chris, calm down, relax, hold on, lower your voice a second. Why is this problem so big? Oh, well, it's going to cost us $1 million. Holy cow, I want to have a tantrum too now. So as you start to understand that, okay, all right, Chris, thanks for telling me that this is such an expensive potential mistake. What do you think we should do in the short term and the long term to reduce the risk? As you start to talk solutions, in my experience, then you can start to diffuse the urgency that is causing the tantrum. But if you didn't actively listen to that, how are you ever going to hear what the real problem is that's, exciting the person, that is making them get to this kind of tantrum level communication, right?
Yes, yes, indeed. And one thing also is what these persons are, some persons are trying to achieve of you, maybe a reaction, a better reaction when they do the trumpet, the tantrum, excuse me. The thing is, um, don't get into this game of this person. No, maybe they're trying to make you mad. Maybe they're trying to get a reaction from you that it is not good. If you act, as you mentioned, calmly, if you have listening and everything, they won't. They might be a little bit frustrated, but they might not stick. There are other people who might stick to the same point and try to do something. And you have to understand, in my opinion, that there has to be a limit of, you tell me if I'm wrong or not, there has to be a limit of the interaction that we could talk with this person. If it happens that regardless of the actions, regardless of the words that we have spoken, this person remains the same. You might say, I think, okay, go to this meeting room and chill out, or go to a walk and chill out, and then maybe return to with me and we could talk. Maybe they had to let the steam out and they don't know how to do it. So if all the actions have been taken and there is no solution, maybe this kind of suggestion might work.
Yeah, I guess, as always, when we're talking about some of the situations, on many of our episodes, there's context that it's difficult for us to describe that would be relevant in your decision making. If this is a person that you've known for 5 years and has never raised their voice in that entire 5 years, you're going to approach it perhaps a little bit differently than the person that they have happened to have a tantrum about once every 3 to 4 months, and you've known them for 5 years and they do it constantly. Your approaches are going to be a bit different. In the person who's this is the first time ever, I'm probably going to invest more time in diffusing it, and probably I would go with them on that walk. Let's go take a walk out in the parking lot, around the building, in the park, whatever, depending on what the physical locations are. Let's relieve the stress of being in the office environment, and let's talk about what the problem is, and we can try and come up with some solutions. Versus if it's the person I've seen have tantrums time and time again, at some point, you're really got to say, look, this is inappropriate behavior, and you need to escalate these problems. And I agree, it's a problem, Roberto. You're right, this is a problem, but you've got to start communicating it more calmly. You can't be this loud in the office, so same kind of rant. It might be about the exact same problem, but One person has never ranted or had a tantrum in 5 years. One person does it every couple of months. My techniques are going to be, significantly different in how I invest my own time as a leader or as a peer even in diffusing it. Because if this person is somebody who just does this constantly and as a peer, I'm not going to invest as much time in diffusing it. I'm going to be much more abrupt, much more upfront with Roberto. This is not acceptable communication. You're getting too loud about this topic again. I agree with you, it's important, but I am not going to talk to you about it until you can do it in a quieter tone of voice here in the office. Why? Because you do it every 3 months. So when you're ready to talk about it, let's talk about it. I want to work through this with you, but I am not going to tolerate you yelling at me. Totally different technique than somebody who's never ranted ever before in their life.
Yes, a couple of things. The first one is we spend a lot of time at the office. So either you will have a colleague, a peer, which has been, I don't know, maybe a couple of months versus a guy which has been 5 or 10 years. We spend a lot of time with them, even though we have to spend more time than we spend with our partners, with your wife, etc. So we spend a lot of time, and for that you begin knowing the character's person and how well to behave in certain situations or not. But one thing it is when, and you mentioned as an example, if a specific person runs out about every couple of months, this is like a children's story. I don't recall the name in English, but in Spanish is Pedro y el Lobo, or Pedro and the Wolf. And Pedro, what it did was to tell that there is the wolf coming, and all the villagers begin staring. Ha ha ha! It was a joke. And every time he did it until the wolf came, and there were problems. It happens the same with the person who runs out, who does the tantrum every couple of months. They begin, okay, man, it is the same. And when happens the problem, you won't find it a truth. You will say, oh man, this guy, it is doing the same. So acknowledging this is a two-way project from yourselves and the person who is doing the therapy. If that person is doing often, something has to be done by this person, because when it really happens and it has more weight of the tantrum, maybe there is not going to be a solution. No?
Right. Or they won't be an appropriate response because they've cried wolf so many times that you don't get excited about their tantrum, even though it may be the biggest problem your company's ever faced. But because they've made every problem seem like a mountain, then you won't pay it enough attention. And I think sometimes, if we've rewarded that kind of tantrum behavior, meaning, and sometimes rewarding that tantrum behavior could just mean that you spent more time with that person than other peers or other direct reports or other bosses. You're rewarding that tantrum in a way because you're reacting to it and you're investing more of your time in it. So you've got to be careful about kind of rewarding the person who's having the tantrum, because if the team sees that, and again, this doesn't matter whether it's peer, boss, direct report, doesn't matter on the relationship, but if people see that having the tantrum gets the most attention, whoever has the tantrum gets the most resources to solve their problem, then everyone's going to have a tantrum over every problem. Why? Because they watched what happened with Mr. Tantrum, so you've got to keep in mind, sometimes it isn't just that you're trying to solve the problem and situation with the person that's having the tantrum. You've got to make sure you don't cause damage with those around you in the office space, because in general, culturally maybe makes a difference, but in your office culture, yelling and screaming, probably not, appropriate. Maybe there are some companies where, I don't know, if you're working in a factory and it's really loud, you always got to yell at each other. Hey, you can't hear over the machinery. So maybe a tantrum, it's hard to tell when someone's having a tantrum versus not. But I lived and worked in a very quiet office environment. So if somebody was raising their voice, it was very disruptive. It's disruptive to the team. And you don't want to be seen, well, gosh, every time Bill raises his voice and has a tantrum, the boss helps solve all his problems and he gets more resources. Oh, I better start having tantrums about all my problems. Then you'll have a whole
Oh,
team of, having tantrums.
yes. Um, I have a question. What about if a Mr. Tantrum or a Mrs. Tantrum is your boss? What do you do?
It is tough, and I've had that. I've had bosses that like to, I think, like to use a tantrum or a fight to see how passionate I was about a topic. Um, Sometimes I would begin to escalate myself, volume, etc. You have to learn over time that every time you increase your volume, they're just going to raise their volume that much more. And in a boss situation where it's your boss above you and they control your pay raise, your performance review, your future job prospects, obviously you've got to be very, very careful about how you defend yourself and argue back. Sometimes the best situation, in those kinds of situations is to just continue to use the same diffusing techniques. Well, why do you feel that? Well, you're my boss, Roberto, why do you feel so strongly about that? Why do you want me to do that so urgently? I don't understand. Don't blame Roberto for anything. Say, I still don't understand, Roberto. Why is that such a big problem? Help me understand. And hopefully as they explain it to you, they will calm down because you're being kind of defenseless in that I don't fully understand. I see the problem, but I don't understand why it's a large problem. And if you can get them to talk about it, you can hopefully diffuse some of that passion behind it, some of the volume, the yelling. Because I really have a hard time when people start yelling at me, regardless of whether it's peers or my wife or anything. I don't like that kind of confrontation type situation. So I always try to diffuse. I don't understand why is this so serious? I don't understand. And that way
Yeah.
you're taking it on yourself. You're not blaming them. You're not explaining it to me, right, Roberto? I don't, no. It's, hey, I don't understand. Could you give me more reasons why this is so important? Then you're taking it on yourself, and the person who's having the tantrum doesn't feel attacked, because maybe what's causing the tantrum is they're kind of having a bit of panic because others are attacking them over this problem that they haven't solved yet, right? So they're getting attacked that you don't know about, peers or others saying, Roberto, you didn't get this done, and you're having panic about it, and so now you're expressing that stress on me, your direct report. And I don't get it. I don't see that your boss's boss has been down to your office every hour about this problem. I didn't know that, and so.
Yes, or maybe they're feeling threatened, maybe by a certain situation that you don't know about, and they have been thinking about it, and when you bring up the scenario situation or the idea, they snap like this. So like you, I don't like being yelled to. I really don't. And I used to have a boss many years ago which liked the sound of his voice because he was streaming most of the time and doing tantrums. And even though I remember he was writing something on the board sometime, and I was at the end of the meeting room, and suddenly it is not the pen. Well, whatever he was writing, he threw it back to me, and it was really close to my face like this, and say, hey man, what's going on? Why you did that? No, because you began talking and everything. And I say, no, I didn't talk. It was this guy. But he got directed his anger towards me, which I wasn't. So I think when there is, there might be an abuse of the power of your boss towards you, I think that is the place I don't want to be. So if people who are listening to this has have has these kind of situations, polish your resume and begin working somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're not psychologists. You and I are
Yeah,
not, and we don't expect leaders, humane leaders, whether they're peers or direct reports or the actual leader, to be psychologists. We have to have emotional intelligence, and we need to work on our our emotional intelligence to make sure that we understand how others are feeling. But you're spot on. Ultimately, if this is kind of a reoccurring problem, whether it's your boss, a peer, or your direct reports, there has to be this decision at some point to say, if this is happening a lot and my techniques aren't working, and I've done some research and tried different techniques, some of the ones that we've discussed, and they flat out don't work, now you got to start making decisions. Is it, do you cut, if it's a peer, do you just cut ties with them? You avoid them as much as possible. If it's one of your direct reports, do you have to start them on an action plan to change their behavior, or you're going to fire them or locate them to a different team? Or if it's your boss, is it time to polish the resume and look for another opportunity? It's challenging to make that decision. I think in general, humane leaders give people more than 3 strikes, right? We want to pitch and try for a long time to help people be better. That's what a humane leader does. But at some point, you're going to reach your personal threshold of, I'm not going to put up with this any longer. You've done all the things we've talked about. You've tried things we haven't even talked about. And at some point, you say, enough is enough. And you've crossed the line to take a different course of action. And again, depending on who's the relationship is with, for me, in the boss that was yelling at me the most, and it was actually 2 levels up, so it was not my direct boss, it was the boss above the boss yelling at me. I went to a different part of the company. I immediately polished up my resume, stayed in the company, but immediately polished up my resume and started clicking apply on the old job webpage for our company and said, look, I can't solve this. So the only solution that was within my power was to polish my resume and start looking for something else. And I'll tell you what, the first job that I clicked on, I felt so much stress relief because I was now taking action. The problem, which I had been trying to solve, which I had tried lots of techniques on, wasn't working. I was getting more frustrated myself and stressed. But I'll tell you what, once I put myself back in the driver's seat of making the decisions, I have decided I am not staying in this situation. I am going to find a different role. Holy cow, I clicked. I literally felt like I immediately had cool air blowing on me. I clicked the submit. I didn't get that first job, but just taking those first steps of putting control back in my hands, I'm taking care of the situation. I'm going to drive what happens. I felt 1,000 times better. It was, I know it was psychological to click and do that first apply, and I can't remember how many other roles I applied for before I finally moved on. But just getting motivated to say, I've had enough, I've reached my limit, I'm going to start applying. It really empowered me to feel so much better about the situation. And at that point, then when the rant would come and this boss would bypass my boss to rant at me, or my boss would have to tell me the boss ranted about me, I just like, well, that's unfortunate. And I'd move on because I wasn't going to change it. Nothing was going to change it. So, oh well.
yeah, yeah. And you did that because you have high emotional intelligence. You acknowledge your emotions. You understood that the tantrum wasn't made by you. It was made by other person. and you understood how to differentiate those emotions from that guilt. Maybe he was trying to make you maybe guilt or something. But when you have a high emotional intelligence, you could act more calmly and wisely as well. So when you chose to remain with the company, within the company, in another position, in another department, it was the best. So I think people who are highly emotional intelligence speaking could act more wisely and don't let other people emotion affect you. So when it happens, it could be much better for you. So I know that emotional intelligence is like a muscle. When you acknowledge more of your emotions and don't act harshly about it, it is something that your emotional intelligence is going to grow and get stronger.
Yep, absolutely. What was your worst kind of tantrum situation that you've ever experienced?
The worst would be when a former boss uh, began cursing about of me, saying bad words to me in a meeting room with I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 peers, and he was
In front
giving
of
me
people. In front
in
of
front of
people.
people, and he was telling me the a-hole curse to me in front of all those people, and he
Wow.
was doing a tantrum. You don't know how bad. And what I did was to tell him, Manuel, don't tell me this, don't tell me like this. I'm talking to you with respect. Please treat me with respect. No, Roberto, because you're right, and all that bad words. And he told me, and what I did was, okay, when I this meeting ended, I went directly to HR. I exposed this, and it didn't happen anything because he was the sales director, the stars director, and HR told me, oh, he's the guy who's selling all the stuff and bringing the revenue to the company. And I knew back then, okay, this is the place that I don't want to be here, and I move on. And that was the worst. What about you?
Yeah, it very very similar. I mean, the situation that I was describing wasn't quite as dramatic as that, but the most embarrassing, or the one where I really said, okay, I'm moving on. I'm on a conference call. This is pre-pandemic, but on a conference call, and it's a weekly meeting. So we're all on this meeting. The whole team is on it, and I'm on it not as a direct report to this CIO, but as a supporting, because we were an auxiliary service department to his department. And I had great reviews from the prior CIO that was in that role for years. And that CIO had left, new CIO came in, and all of his direct reports I'd worked with 3 to 4 years prior already. So very good reputation. All the feedback in my performance reviews from them was great. They depended on me a lot because I'd been with the company so long. I could help them even in areas that were not my responsibility. Some of the feedback was, Chris is the guy to go to. When you don't know where to go to Chris. He may not be able to solve it, but he knows where to go to get it solved. Well, in the first like 8 weeks, this guy on the conference call, new CIO, starts saying how worthless I am. I don't do anything for him. And I'm just a worthless of you know what. And one of his direct reports that's on the conference call, he says, I won't mention this guy's name because he's still at the company. He's like, Chris is still on the call with us. He's like, oh, I was just joking.
No way.
No way. I never joined the call again after that, and got a different role. I'm like done. I'm not helping this guy do anything. I still help all the people that reported to him as much as I could, but I'm like I don't take that from nobody. Done.
Oh my God.
So there are people that can be successful, and he actually got promoted subsequent to that over time. But I mean, that just shows you life ain't fair. Life is never fair. But I can tell you that it's really up to you. I didn't say anything. I didn't swear back at him at the call. I said, thank you for the feedback. I'll keep that in mind. Little snarky, but I'm like, done. You get one strike like that for me when you're in that senior of a leadership role. And I never helped a guy on anything ever again.
Nice. Great that you act like that. And well, people there were people who has done tantrums, and there will be people who will do it more. But if we add emotional intelligence speaking good, and we have our strengths, and we know what to do and what not to, not let other people talk bad to us, and we recognize ourselves. There is somewhere else we can talk. Well,
That's right.
Okay, so with this we can do the wrap up. Right, man. Okay. Thanks for joining us on another episode of How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. We hope our insights help you become a smarter, more strategic leader. Apply today's lessons to see the positive impact on your team and career. Catch all our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and YouTube. Join us next week as we discuss something trendy in the leadership world. Until then, stay humane and stay successful. Bye bye, Chris.
See you later, Roberto.